First contact and arrogance. The Galactic Empire's fleet arrived above Earth like a storm of metal and fire, their massive warships blotting out the stars. Their presence was neither accidental nor benevolent. To them, humanity was nothing more than a primitive species, a minor footnote in their expansionist conquest. The first transmission from their flagship was confident, condescending, and absolute. Humans of Earth, you stand before the might of the Galactic Empire. Your civilization has been deemed unworthy of independent existence. Surrender, and we shall integrate you into our order. Resist, and you will be crushed. World leaders scrambled to respond, but within hours, the Empire's forces had already landed. Towering bipedal soldiers in gleaming silver armor strode across capital cities, their plasma rifles humming with energy. They made no effort to hide their disdain for Earth's technology. At a press conference in Washington, General Marcus Reed stood before a crowd of journalists, his face tight with frustration. They claim they're offering peaceful annexation, but make no mistake, this is an invasion. A holographic Imperial commander materialized beside him, a sneer on his alien face. Your weapons are crude, your army's weak. We offer you civilization. Deny us, and you will learn the futility of defiance. Reed clenched his jaw. We're not interested in being your subjects. The commander chuckled. Primitive sentiment. With that, the Empire made its intentions clear. Troop transports descended like falling stars, unloading entire legions of armored soldiers. Tanks with gravitic repulsors floated down streets unchallenged, their sleek energy cannons scanning for threats. Overhead, fighter craft patrolled the skies, ensuring Earth's militaries could not even take flight. But humanity was far from defeated. The first skirmish. In the rural plains of Kansas, a small resistance group had formed. Military personnel, survivalists, and civilians unwilling to bow. They had no energy weapons, no shielding, no advanced technology. What they had were old-fashioned ballistic weapons, stockpiles of ammunition, and sheer determination. Lieutenant Jake Carter peered through binoculars at an approaching Imperial patrol. A dozen silver-armored soldiers escorting a floating drone tank. They're spreading out, he whispered. Guess they're expecting cowards. Beside him, Sergeant Luis Ramirez patted the barrel of his M2 Browning heavy machine gun, which was set up on a makeshift barricade. They think we're primitives. Let's educate them. The Imperials moved with practiced precision, their rifles glowing ominously. One of them raised a scanner, searching for life signs. Before he could react, a sharp crack echoed through the fields. One of the resistance snipers had fired. The alien soldier dropped instantly, a fist-sized hole where his face had been. The rest of the patrol hesitated for a split second, long enough for Carter to give the order. Light him up. The M2 Browning roared to life, spitting a hail of .50 caliber rounds. The first few shots sparked harmlessly against the Imperials' personal shields, but as the heavy bullets continued striking in rapid succession, the shields flared, then collapsed. The moment their energy defenses failed, the rounds tore through their armor as if it were paper. The Empire's soldiers, once so confident in their superiority, crumpled in sprays of purple blood. Some tried to return fire, their plasma bolts scorching the earth, but they had no cover. More bullets, more screams. The patrol was annihilated in seconds. Then the drone tank activated, its energy cannon charged with a whine, preparing to fire. Ramirez didn't hesitate. He swung the M2's barrel toward it and held down the trigger. The concentrated hail of bullets slammed into its floating chassis, punching through its armor and rupturing internal systems. The machine whined, sparks flying from its core, then exploded in a violent blast. The battlefield fell silent. Jake Carter exhaled, lowering his rifle. The Imperials were dead, their bodies lying in the dirt like broken dolls. He stepped forward and kicked over one of the silver helmets, revealing a face twisted in disbelief. Ramirez laughed, slapping the side of his machine gun. Primitive, my ass. The Empire's response. The destruction of an Imperial patrol wasn't just a minor setback. It was a humiliation. The Galactic Empire had never lost to a primitive species before. The Imperial admiral in charge of Earth's conquest slammed his fist against his command console. They killed our troops with metal slugs? Absurd. A subordinate hesitated before responding. Sir, their projectile weapons seem to exploit a weakness in our shields. Repeated kinetic impacts. Silence, the admiral snapped. Deploy reinforcements. Make an example of them. The Empire's arrogance had cost them their first engagement. But instead of re-evaluating their enemy, they doubled down. Earth would not surrender. And soon, the Empire would learn why humans had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of war. The ambush in the streets. A false show of power. The Galactic Empire, humiliated by the destruction of their patrol in Kansas, refused to acknowledge their mistake. Instead of adapting, they doubled down on their arrogance. To remind humanity of its proper place, the Empire announced a grand military parade in Washington, D.C. The plan was simple: march their elite soldiers through Earth's capital, showcasing their technological might. A clear message: resistance was futile. Humanity had other plans. In the ruins of a government bunker beneath the city, General Marcus Reed leaned over a holographic map, studying the Imperial route. They'll be moving down Constitution Avenue. Open streets, tall buildings on both sides. It's a kill box. Lieutenant Jake Carter, fresh from the Kansas engagement, nodded. And they don't expect a real fight. They think we're afraid. Ramirez grinned, patting the side of his M2 Browning. Let's prove them wrong. The resistance had prepared well. Every rooftop along the parade route concealed snipers and machine gun teams. Improvised explosives were buried beneath the asphalt. The plan was simple: lure the enemy into complacency, then hit them with everything. The march begins. On the morning of the parade, the Empire's forces moved in perfect formation. Rows of armored soldiers, their silver armor gleaming, marched down the boulevard. Massive hover tanks floated alongside them, their energy cannons primed. Drones flew overhead, scanning the streets for threats. Crowds of terrified civilians were forced to watch, their silence taken as submission. The Imperial commander, a towering figure with 4 glowing eyes, stood at the head of the column. His voice echoed through loudspeakers. Behold the power of the Galactic Empire. This world will be tamed, as countless others before it. From a rooftop, Carter watched through his scope, waiting for the signal. His earpiece crackled with General Reed's voice. Wait for it. Let them get comfortable. The Empire's arrogance was on full display. Soldiers lowered their weapons, smirking at the helpless civilians. One even tossed aside his rifle, laughing. That was their mistake. The trap is sprung. Boom! An explosion ripped through the street as a hidden charge detonated beneath the lead hover tank. The massive war machine flipped onto its side, crashing into a row of soldiers. Smoke and fire filled the air. Before the Imperials could react, the rooftops erupted with gunfire. Heavy machine guns opened up, raining lead down on the parade. .50 caliber rounds slammed into the soldiers' shields. At first, the energy barriers held, flickering under the relentless barrage. But then, just like in Kansas, they overloaded. The moment their shields failed, the true slaughter began. The Imperials had never faced ballistic weapons in sustained combat before. They were used to enemies wielding plasma rifles, which could be countered with energy dampeners. But solid metal slugs moving at high velocity? Their armor wasn't built for that. Rows of elite troops were cut down in seconds. Blood, purple and human, streaked the pavement. Some Imperials tried to return fire, but the resistance fighters were dug in, protected by reinforced positions. Carter lined up a shot and pulled the trigger. A bullet punched through an officer's helmet, sending him sprawling. Beside him, Ramirez unleashed the M2 Browning into a cluster of enemy troops, cutting them down like wheat before a scythe. The Imperial commander roared in fury. Deploy the drones. Burn them all. The sky filled with sleek, black war drones, their plasma cannons charging. But before they could fire, a hidden anti-air gun atop a nearby rooftop came to life. A barrage of flak shells detonated in the air, shredding the drones into fiery wreckage. The Empire breaks. Panic spread through the Imperial ranks. Their supposed display of dominance had turned into a massacre. Officers barked orders, trying to regroup, but the resistance fighters pressed the attack. A group of Imperial soldiers attempted to retreat toward their landing zone, but that's exactly where the heaviest machine guns were waiting. From behind a fortified barricade, another resistance team opened fire. The trapped Imperials fell one by one, their bodies piling in the street. Realizing their forces were collapsing, the Imperial commander shouted into his communicator, "Send reinforcements. We need immediate evac." His words were cut short by a sniper round tearing through his skull. His massive form crumpled lifelessly onto the pavement. The last remaining Imperials, once so confident, so untouchable, threw down their weapons. Some ran. Some begged for mercy. The resistance fighters gave none. Aftermath. As the smoke cleared, Carter stepped onto the street, kicking aside a discarded Imperial rifle. He looked around at the bodies, the wreckage, the shattered pride of an empire that had underestimated humanity. Ramirez slung his weapon over his shoulder, surveying the destruction. He let out a low whistle. Well, that wasn't very civilized of them. General Reed's voice crackled over the radio. "Outstanding work, everyone. The Empire will think twice before calling us primitive again." But Carter wasn't so sure. The Empire wouldn't accept defeat easily. They would return with bigger guns, stronger troops, and deadlier machines. And when they did, humanity would be ready. Escalation and adaptation. The Empire strikes back. The ambush in Washington had been a total victory for humanity, but it was only the beginning. The Galactic Empire did not take humiliation lightly. Within days, the skies above Earth darkened as more Imperial warships arrived. This time, they weren't here for a parade. High above Earth, aboard the Imperial Judgment, Grand Admiral Zyros glared at the battlefield reports. His forces had been massacred by what his predecessors called primitive apes with crude weapons. He would not make the same mistake. "Deploy the heavy infantry," he ordered. "Unleash the war machines." This time, no survivors. From orbit, massive drop pods rained down, crashing into cities and military bases worldwide. When they opened, they revealed towering Imperial mechs, bristling with plasma cannons and armored with energy-dampening plating. Alongside them marched new shock troopers, their armor reinforced with kinetic absorption layers designed specifically to counter Earth's ballistic weapons. The Empire had adapted. Now, humanity would have to do the same. New weapons for a new war. In an underground resistance base beneath Colorado, General Reed paced in front of a hollow table, watching reports flood in. "They're changing tactics," he muttered. "Stronger armor, new shield tech. They're learning." Lieutenant Carter, freshly returned from the Washington battle, leaned over the table. "Then we hit them harder." Beside him, Ramirez patted the side of a modified M2 Browning. "Already ahead of you." The resistance had wasted no time studying Imperial technology. Captured energy shields had been reverse-engineered, their weaknesses mapped out. The answer was clear: sheer, overwhelming kinetic force. Instead of slowing their attacks, humanity pushed harder. Machine guns were modified with depleted uranium rounds and tungsten core bullets, capable of punching through even the Empire's newest armor. Snipers were issued rail-assisted rifles, capable of accelerating projectiles to hypersonic speeds. Even homemade artillery pieces, built from scavenged Imperial parts, began appearing on the battlefield. The war had become a battle of adaptation, and humans were very, very good at adapting. The Battle of New Chicago. New Chicago had become a fortress city, one of the last strongholds against the Imperial invasion. The Empire wanted it gone. At dawn, the sky filled with fire as Imperial war machines marched forward. Massive bipedal mechs flanked by waves of soldiers in improved armor. From a rooftop, Carter peered through his scope. Here they come. Across the city, resistance fighters crouched behind barricades, fingers on triggers. Then, with a deafening roar, the first wave of Imperial mechs opened fire. Buildings shattered under plasma fire. Entire streets turned to molten slag. But humanity had set a trap. As the mechs advanced, hidden explosives, buried in the rubble, detonated beneath them. One after another, the towering machines staggered, their balance disrupted. That was the moment the heavy gunners had been waiting for. From fortified positions, massive anti-material rifles, and modified machine guns unleashed hell. Depleted uranium rounds shredded through weak points in the mech's armor, rupturing power cores. One by one, the war machines collapsed, burning wreckage lighting up the battlefield. The new Imperial shock troopers, confident in their upgraded armor, charged in next. But humanity had already adapted to their improvements. Ramirez grinned as he opened up with his M2 Browning, now loaded with armor-piercing incendiary rounds. The first line of enemy troops barely took a step before they were torn apart, their reinforced armor doing nothing against sustained, high-caliber fire. The battle raged for hours, but as the smoke cleared, one thing was certain: New Chicago still stood. And the Empire had once again underestimated humanity's resilience. A turning point. Back aboard the Imperial Judgment, Grand Admiral Zyros watched the battle footage with a mix of fury and disbelief. They are adapting? He clenched his fists. This is impossible. A subordinate hesitated before speaking. Sir, humanity's weapons may be primitive, but they are terrifyingly effective. They adjust, they modify, they improve. Zyros scowled. Then we escalate further. Prepare orbital bombardments. The officer swallowed hard. Sir, if we glass the planet, we can't conquer it. Zyros turned his eyes cold. We don't need to conquer them. We just need to make an example of them. The storm on the horizon. As resistance fighters in New Chicago celebrated their victory, an alarm blared across the underground base. A technician turned, pale-faced. General, Imperial warships are repositioning. There! The ground trembled. A flash of light erupted in the distance. Then another, and another. Carter ran to the surface. When he looked to the horizon, his blood ran cold. Mushroom clouds rose where entire cities had once stood. The Empire was done playing games. The war had just entered its most brutal phase. Victory through fire and lead. The Empire's wrath. The sky burned. The Galactic Empire, enraged by their failures, had begun indiscriminate orbital bombardments. Cities vanished in nuclear-bright flashes, their populations erased in an instant. Millions died in the opening salvo. Those who survived watched helplessly as fire rained from above, scorching the earth itself. In the Resistance Command bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Marcus Reed slammed his fist against the table. They're not trying to conquer us anymore. They want extermination. Lieutenant Jake Carter, still covered in dust from the New Chicago battle, clenched his jaw. Then we make sure they fail. Ramirez, standing beside his modified M2 Browning, nodded grimly. They may have the sky, but we own the ground. A new plan was forming, a desperate, all-or-nothing gamble. If humanity couldn't match the Empire's power in space, then they would strike where it hurt them most. Their command structure. The target? The Imperial Judgment, the Empire's flagship, currently in low orbit overseeing the destruction. The mission? Board it, sabotage it, and make the Empire bleed. The last offensive. Captured Imperial tech had given humanity one advantage: stolen dropships. Engineers had reverse-engineered them, stripped out tracking devices, and reprogrammed the controls. Now, those dropships, disguised as Imperial reinforcements, would take humanity's deadliest warriors straight into the belly of the beast. As the Resistance fighters loaded into the dropships, Carter checked his rifle one last time. He glanced at Ramirez, who was grinning as he hefted his machine gun. "Hell of a way to go out," Ramirez said. Carter smirked. "Who said anything about going out?" The dropships launched. From orbit, the Empire barely noticed the incoming vessels. Just another wave of what they assumed were their own reinforcements. The deception held until the very last second, when the ships adjusted course and slammed into the Imperial Judgment's hull. The battle for Earth had just moved into space. War aboard the Imperial Judgment. The moment the dropship doors blew open, the Resistance poured out, weapons blazing. Imperial crew members barely had time to react before they were cut down by automatic fire. Sirens blared. Security teams rushed in, plasma rifles charging, but the corridors of the Imperial judgment were not built for prolonged gunfights. And against humanity's overwhelming firepower, they stood no chance. Ramirez set up his machine gun at a choke point and unleashed hell, cutting down entire squads as they tried to advance. The ship's once sterile hallways were now filled with smoke, blood, and the screams of dying Imperials. Carter's team pushed toward the reactor core. The plan was simple: cripple the ship, force the Empire to retreat, and end the war in one decisive blow. But the Empire wasn't done fighting yet. Grand Admiral Zyro's last stand. Deep in the heart of the ship, Grand Admiral Zyros stood before his personal guard, seething with rage. He had underestimated these humans for the last time. "They are vermin," he snarled, "and I will exterminate them myself." Armed with an experimental energy blade and wearing a prototype exosuit, Zyros stormed into the battle himself. Plasma bolts bounced off his armor as he carved through resistance fighters like a living weapon. Carter saw him coming. "We've got a problem." Ramirez reloaded. "I've got the solution." As Zyros charged, Ramirez let loose with his M2 Browning. The .50 caliber rounds slammed into the Admiral's exosuit, causing it to spark and shudder. But the armor held. Zyros roared and lunged, only for Carter to fire a high-powered sniper round straight through the weak point in his helmet. The Admiral staggered, clutching his ruined face. Ramirez didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, pressed the smoking barrel of his machine gun against Zyro's chest, and fired. The Grand Admiral of the Galactic Empire was torn apart in a storm of lead. The Empire falls. With Zyros dead and the reactor sabotaged, the Imperial judgment was doomed. Explosions rippled through the ship as Carter's team raced to their stolen dropships. The moment they cleared the hull, the flagship detonated in a brilliant explosion, visible even from the ground. The Empire's forces, leaderless and in disarray, panicked. Some ships fled, others were shot down by now emboldened human forces. The war, once thought hopeless, was suddenly over. Aftermath. Humanity stands tall. On the ground, battered but victorious resistance fighters watched as the Imperial fleet retreated. Ramirez lit a cigar, standing atop the wreckage of an Imperial war machine. He took a slow drag and smirked. "Primitive, huh?" Carter laughed. "Yeah, primitive enough to kick their asses." General Reed's voice came over the radio. "The Empire is gone. We won. Humanity had survived." No, humanity had prevailed. The Galactic Empire had learned a lesson they would never forget. Earth was not a prize to be taken, and humans were not prey. They were predators.